So originally, I wanted to do a live reaction to Star Wars Tales of the Jedi, but between getting this new computer, getting it set up, getting everything ready to go on it, importing all my data, all that good stuff, and having a stomach virus the last couple of days, I just said, you know what, screw it. And I decided to watch the miniseries on my own time and instead do an in-depth discussion video, which honestly, I think this is more so my forte regardless. I think I'm better at discussions than I am live reactions, if I'm being honest. Um, so let's actually dive into Tales of the Jedi. So, a little bit of history with me in Star Wars, more specifically recent Star Wars. I've been burned out on Star Wars since The Rise of Skywalker. Well, honestly, since The Last Jedi came out. I hate what Disney has done to this franchise. It's my favorite film franchise, and they've just completely runned it into the ground. I mean, in my opinion, the franchise at this point is knocking on death's door. The news came out about a new movie potentially coming out December 2025, and the reactions to it range from complete apathy to major backlash. I was more so in the apathy category, to be honest. But if you want to see my reaction to that news, my full reaction to that news, I will have a video link down below about that news. So with that in mind, going into Tales of the Jedi, I was keeping expectations low, but unlike with Andor, which I don't have any intention of checking out, I don't have any intention of watching it. It just doesn't interest me. I like Rogue One, but I really didn't think Andor was a character that needed his own series. I just think it's kind of weird. Unlike with Andor, I still wanted to check out this mini-series because of Dave Filoni's involvement in it. Dave Filoni was basically George Lucas's Padawan. Filoni worked directly under George when he owned the IP, and you have to remember that the Clone Wars animated series, the second one, the larger one, was a collaboration of Filoni and Lucas. Filoni understands and gets Star Wars and the story that Lucas was trying to tell on a level that Kathleen Kennedy, J.J. Abrams, or Rian Johnson will never really understand. So because of the respect that I have for Filoni, I was always going to check out Tales of the Jedi. And I have to say, coming out of it, I was not disappointed. Once again, Dave Filoni delivers a product that is absolutely fantastic. And to me, stories like this are what Star Wars is all about. So enough jerking off Dave Filoni. This mini-series can basically be broken up into two sections. 3 episodes were about Ahsoka, and 3 episodes were about Dooku. And I'm going to cover these 2 segments in 2 separate videos because they really are their own self-contained stories that really have nothing to do with one another. So in this video, we're going to be starting off with the Count Dooku episodes, which were, in my honest opinion, the more interesting of the stories and the more cohesive of the 2 narratives. So actually talking here about Count Dooku a little bit, Count Dooku is a character that I feel is grossly underrated. If you were to ask me my top 10 Star Wars characters, Count Dooku easily finds a place on that list. I'm going to give a really unpopular opinion here and tell you that I think Dooku is a far more interesting character and villain than Darth Maul. To me, that's not even a question. I know that Maul looks cooler, he has a cooler lightsaber design, but Dooku has always been the more layered villain and the more interesting one to discuss in my own personal opinion. So when we learn from the trailers that Dooku is going to get some exploration in this miniseries, I was overjoyed. And once again, Filoni did not disappoint when it came to demonstrating why Dooku is such a fascinating villain. I'm going to start off by saying that Count Dooku did nothing wrong. Let me clarify. Count Dooku did nothing wrong, but Darth Tyrannus did. Tales of the Jedi follows Count Dooku on a couple of adventures, one with a young Qui-Gon Jinn and one with Mace Windu, and both of these missions, we get to see more of the corruption within the Republic. We get to see more of the fractures, the divisions that are rising up in the galaxy. And I think it's a very fascinating look at the politics of Star Wars that probably isn't as is not presented in such a boring manner as what a lot of people criticize the prequel films over. So let's dive into the first episode with Count Dooku. The first episode with Dooku focuses on him and Qui-Gon as a Padawan traveling to a planet to negotiate the return of a senator's son who was kidnapped. But we learned that the village that kidnapped this kid did so only to have a bargaining chip to make the senator of this particular planet acknowledge the suffering and poverty that they are stricken with. They're not hurting the kid or anything, and the kid even comes to recognize and sympathize with what these people are going through. Count Dooku and Qui-Gon also recognize that the senator has been corrupted by being a career politician and is not taking the suffering of his people into consideration whatsoever. So when the senator shows up ready to kill all of these people, his own constituents, Dooku is ready to just straight up force choke this guy. Now, obviously, this demonstrates Dooku's dark side tendencies even this many years back, but you can see where Dooku is coming from. You can understand the position that Dooku is taking here. The senator in this particular episode even says that the Jedi serve the Senate, and Dooku retorts by saying, "No, the Jedi serve the people of the Republic." I love this debate because it reflects a very serious issue going on in our real world, which is, do the police, the FBI, law enforcement, etc., do these law enforcement institutions, do they really serve the people, or do they serve the government and the institutions themselves? Dooku is taking a firm stance here that he will not be a puppet of the Senate. He serves the people. And really beyond that, a Jedi is meant to serve the will of the Force, not the will of the Senate. People often talk about keeping politics out of content, out of entertainment, out of storytelling, and I agree with that for the most part, but you can bring political situations into your story. It's just the way that you do it, and it's the subjects that we're talking about. And I think that this is a very important subject. I think this is a very important topic. It's obviously political, but I think the way it's done here, it's done rather masterfully. And that just shows you how much better of a writer that Filoni is as compared to a lot of other people who are bringing politics into their content. The way Filoni does it here, it's not controversial, and more importantly, it's very subtle. It's not preaching. It's not preachy. It's not overly preachy. It's just very subtly done and very subtly written. And I think it's masterfully written. You can definitely tell the debate that's going on here. I feel like a lot of people wouldn't pick up on it, but if you're, of a higher intelligence bracket, you're gonna see the debate that's going on here, and it's a debate that's very relevant for our time. So I really liked this debate between Dooku and the senator. I thought that was masterfully written. That's how you do politics in a story. Dooku's methods are definitely questionable in this scenario, but his viewpoint and his position, they're not wrong. He's in the right here. This is one of the major flaws of the Jedi Order in the time period during and leading up to the Clone Wars, which is they have become less and less servants of the Force and more so lackeys of the Senate, which is not what Jedi are meant to be at all, whatsoever. The Jedi lost sight of who they really are, and this is one of the reasons why the Sith were able to nearly destroy them in Revenge of the Sith. Dooku recognized this issue decades earlier, and no one listened to him. Dooku saw the corruption in both the Senate and the Jedi, and he was completely in the right to call them out on it. People, even in real life, they practically, especially in the West, they practically deify democracy. They treat democracy itself as this secular god, and this blinds them to how corrupt a democracy can be. I mean, Sidious didn't just rise to power and overthrow the Republic out of nowhere. The Sith used the pre-existing corruption that had infected the Republic for centuries and took advantage of that to speed up the collapse. But make no mistake, Sith or no Sith, the Republic was always going to collapse. It was an outcome that was unavoidable. In many ways, it was the corruption of the Republic that is just as responsible for the Empire as the Sith are. Unfortunately, we never get anyone to call this out later on. Particularly, I wish this was a topic that the sequels had delved into. Having specifically, I think Leia would have been the best character to go this route with. having Leia as, she was the politician of the group, realized that it wasn't just enough to restore the Republic, but they should be trying to reform and to fix the New Republic and to try and solve the issues that Dooku points out in these episodes. Obviously, no government is perfect. No government made by human hands will ever be perfect. But the sequels should have had our heroes trying to make it better, trying to not only make a new republic, but a better republic. Anyways, getting back to this episode, Qui-Gon frees the senator's son and stops Dooku from killing the senator, and it's the son who is finally able to get his father to help these people who are suffering. Dooku even acknowledges that while he and Qui-Gon both recognize the corruption in the Senate and throughout the galaxy, Qui-Gon's methods are superior, and he even states that Qui-Gon is wiser than himself. So even Dooku knows that his methods are wrong. On some level, he recognizes this, but as we know, he eventually becomes a Sith Lord regardless, and he can't help himself from going down the darker path to try and resolve these problems. But, I do think it's important for Dooku to recognize the wisdom of Qui-Gon Jinn because as we go forward and I do Star Wars videos, I'm probably going to bring up a lot that Qui-Gon Jinn is the best example of what a Jedi should be. And I think Dave Filoni even came out in a recent interview, and he said this before, but he's saying it here again. Qui-Gon is what a Jedi should be. Qui-Gon is the best example of what every Jedi should strive to be. And I agree with that absolutely. I've agreed with that for a very long time. There is a reason why Qui-Gon is my favorite character in all of Star Wars, because I think he is exactly what a Jedi should be. So now, let's move on to the next Dooku episode, which takes place sometime later. And we see Dooku and Windu traveling to another planet to investigate the death of another Jedi Master, who seems to have been assassinated while protecting another senator. And right from the get-go, Dooku recognizes that something doesn't really jive with the senator's story of what happened. We go on to learn that it was actually the senator's guards who killed the Jedi, and that these guards are infiltrators from a rebel sect on the planet who are rebelling because the senator is selling off parts of their world for profit. And what is pointed out here, well, two things that are pointed out here in this episode, is that the senator spends so much of his time on Coruscant in the capital that he had become disconnected with the very planet that he is meant to represent, and thus has no qualms of exploiting his own home world for money. This is an effect of something that I like to call capital culture, which is where politicians spend so much time in their capital that they exist in a bubble where they are unaffected or even aware of the problems and issues going on in other parts of the, well, in this case, of the rest of the galaxy. We see this even in the films where the Senate refuses to do anything about the slavery and the crime going on in the Outer Rim worlds like Tatooine in Episode 1, or even the Naboo crisis in Episode 1, where, they were like, well, we'll just, send this issue of the Trade Federation blockade into a committee, and it's like people are dying on this planet, like, you stupid morons, don't you get it? So we even see these issues in the films. The other major issue that this episode highlights is how the Jedi are viewed by some in the galaxy, which ties into the first Dooku episode, and that is that the Jedi are seen as the lapdogs, the pawns, the puppets of the Galactic Senate, and thus why these rebels had no qualms about killing this Jedi. Of course, in the first Dooku episode, the senator there was talking about how the Jedi are supposed to serve the Senate. And, even the people there originally believed that the Jedi are there, on behalf of the senator, not on behalf of the people. And, they even think at one point that Dooku had betrayed them. But it really shows you how the Jedi have really come to be viewed not as these peacekeepers and ambassadors of the Force, but more so as, lapdogs and lackeys of the Senate. And no better example of this is seen than with Mace Windu. Windu in this episode is all about protocol, the rules, not stepping outside the boundaries of the mission, following exactly word for word what the council says. And this is something which is known about Mace Windu even in the Legends continuity as well, Windu views the Republic as the height of civilization, as the end-all be-all. His loyalty is to democracy and the Senate, which even Obi-Wan stated as well to Anakin before their fight in Revenge of the Sith, showing just how far the Jedi had deviated from their loyalty to the Force. And like a good little lapdog obeying his master, Windu ends up getting a seat on the Jedi High Council at the end of this episode. If you want to see everything that is wrong with what the Jedi had become during the prequel era, it's Mace Windu. And then, of course, you had people like Qui-Gon. You have people like Dooku. And as we're going to see in this next episode, you have people like Yaddle who come to realize this problem with the Jedi Council and call them out on it. But, of course, they never listen. And by the time that people like Yoda actually realizes this issue, these problems with the Jedi Order, it's already too late. So that brings us to the final Dooku episode, where we actually see the event in the moment where Dooku officially becomes a Sith Lord. Taking place during the events of Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, we see Dooku having a conversation with Qui-Gon and Master Yaddle regarding the reemergence of the Sith after Maul attacked Qui-Gon on Tatooine. Dooku had been warning the Council of a coming darkness for decades, and even now with the attack of Darth Maul, the Council is so blind and arrogant that they hesitate to acknowledge that the Sith have truly returned. Again, we see the arrogance of the Jedi Order on full display here, that, even given this situation, they still can't bring themselves to believe that they were duped by the Sith 1,000 years ago. So this is the last conversation that Dooku has with Qui-Gon before he leaves for Naboo and meets his end at the hands of Darth Maul. The loss of his apprentice is what finally drives Dooku over the edge. Yaddle goes to console Dooku, but she can sense the darkness growing within him. And also, I thought it was interesting to note here that Yaddle does not speak in the same syntax as Yoda. She speaks normally, so this confirms, in canon at least, that Yoda's speech pattern is something unique to him and not to his species. I thought that was pretty interesting. And, I think that does make Yoda himself and his species as a whole, I think it makes them both even more interesting as far as that goes. So, Yaddle follows Dooku to the Works District of Coruscant, and here she discovers him conversing with Darth Sidious, who at this point he seems to have been working with for some time, though not as a Sith apprentice, obviously, because Maul up to this point was Sidious's apprentice, and we have the whole Rolo 2 thing. So Yaddle attempts to reason with Dooku, explaining that she understands his viewpoint, and she actually agrees with him on the corruption in the Senate and the arrogance of the Jedi Council, even revealing that she had just earlier that same day resigned her position on the Jedi High Council in protest of their arrogance. She even says, Dooku or Qui-Gon didn't need to die. Like, if it wasn't for the arrogance of the Jedi Council, he wouldn't have died. If they weren't so hesitant to believe that the Sith had returned, they could have sent more Jedi to Naboo, and potentially, Qui-Gon would have lived. And for a moment, it seems like Dooku may actually turn on Sidious. He's pissed that Sidious allowed Qui-Gon to be killed by Maul, because Dooku viewed Qui-Gon as kind of like his own son. He's pissed at Sidious. He's surprised to see that Yaddle has come around to agreeing with his viewpoint. But unfortunately, Dooku believes as his successor, Vader would later come to believe, that it's too late for him at this point. Too late for him to turn back to the path of good. And thus we get an epic duel between Dooku and Yaddle, ultimately culminating in the death of Yaddle, the final test Dooku needed to take to prove his loyalty to Sidious and to become Sidious's new Sith apprentice. This is very, very sad because, Dooku... This was a gut-wrenching episode because Dooku's intentions and his beliefs are not wrong. Not even in the slightest is he wrong. But the methods he's taking, the path that he is about to embark on, is nothing but evil. Watching this, I so desperately wanted him to turn around and fight Sidious alongside Yaddle. And who knows, these are two of the Jedi Order's best combatants. they may have actually won and stopped the tragedy that Sidious would bring about. Who knows? But it's that whole Judas Iscariot situation, where Judas was not damned necessarily because of his betrayal of Christ, although that was definitely obviously a horrifying thing to happen. He wasn't damned necessarily because of his betrayal of Christ, but he was damned more so because of his refusal of forgiveness, that he refused to believe that he could be forgiven. And that kind of is what happens here with Dooku. Yaddle is offering him this chance out. She's offering him this chance like, hey, you can still get out of this. You can still come back. You can still turn back to the light. You don't have to go down this dark path. And Dooku's like, I'm too far gone. Like, you can tell, like, maybe Dooku does want to turn back. But at this point, he believes that he is beyond forgiveness. He is beyond redemption. And, it's just tragic. I mean, Dooku was not wrong in his beliefs, his intentions, and his goals. If Dooku had simply left the Jedi and started a separatist movement without Sith involvement, I don't think anyone could really blame him for that. The Republic, regardless of the Sith, was beyond saving at this point, so Dooku would not have been in the wrong to lead other worlds and succeeding from it. This is why I say that Dooku did nothing wrong. However, once he took the path of the Sith, once he killed Yaddle and became Darth Tyrannus, then at that point, he started to do everything wrong. Similar to Anakin, Dooku was a good man who went down the wrong path, and tragically, unlike Anakin, Dooku never got the shot at redemption. He could have been redeemed right here, but, once he became a Sith Lord, his path led him to destruction. And unfortunately, there was no Luke Skywalker at the end of that path to reach out and offer him that chance to come back, which, honestly says a lot about Luke. The man who was once Count Dooku became consumed by the Sith Lord that is Darth Tyrannus. And it's really sad because had he not got wound up with Sidious, Dooku could have been a great leader that could have changed things and saved the galaxy. Not necessarily the Republic, because I honestly believe that at this point the Republic was already doomed and there was no coming back for it. But the galaxy, he could have saved the galaxy, perhaps forming a new government in the aftermath, a better government. Dooku even says all he wants is peace and order, not the chaos and corruption inherent in a dying democracy. And this complexity, I think, is what makes Dooku such a fascinating character. Definitely one of my favorites, and Tales of the Jedi just makes me want to see more of Count Dooku. Alright, that being said, I love these Dooku-focused episodes. Definitely some of the best Star Wars content we have gotten in a very long time. But, I shouldn't expect anything less with Dave Filoni. That being said, I will have another video coming out soon talking about the Ahsoka episodes. But until then, make sure you hit the subscribe button, click the bell for notifications for more Star Wars and pop culture content like this. Of course, like this video and check out my gaming channel, linked down below in the description box below. Tell me what you think about these episodes. Tell me what you think about Tales of the Jedi as a whole down in the comments section below. I'm interested to see what you guys have to say. But that being said, until the next one, until the Ahsoka video, this is Jesker James with the Z, and I'm signing out.